Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice here with my co-host Melissa Whitty, and today we have with us the beautiful and amazing Salome Sibonex.
Thank
She's
you.
a
So
writer,
excited to be here.
writer, artist, and co-founder of the Black Sheep website, which has a lot of amazing material you should check out. I'll give her a chance to tell you what the website actually is at the end, but over to you for a second, Mel.
All right, guys, thanks so much for coming back. If you are here for the first time, could you just do us a quick favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for your comments. We really appreciate them. I wanted to give a shout out to Alexander and Chris and Mubi. I hope I'm saying that right. Probably not, but we really appreciate your kind comments and your encouragement. And Samir, we're going to try to address your questions at the very end. So thank you for posting them and putting thought into them. We really appreciate it.
So I think today we're going to discuss two topics. First is the sort of cancel culture around the firing of the Doge employee for some of his controversial tweets, one might say. It's such as normalize Indian hate and stuff, or hate against Indians, and disapproving of biracial marriage. And then also we're going to try to make time to talk about Hasbara 2.0, which is Israel's attempts to escalate its propaganda in the face of some losing public support in America, and what those efforts are going to look like and what we think the success will be. So starting off with Doge. So the other day, I think late last week, the tweets of this guy surfaced. He's a pretty young guy, I think like 24.
Yeah, I'm going to pull it up.
And yeah, well...
Yeah, there he goes. Doge staffer who accessed the Treasury Department's payment system. They're really on about that. But his name was Big Balls, and this is about 3 months before he was hired by Doge. He posted normalize Indian hate. I think that was by far the most controversial thing that he posted. And then you could not pay me to marry outside my ethnicity. And I believe at one point he said both Gaza and Israel should be wiped off the map, so we don't have to worry about them.
At least he's fair, so
right, yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to sort of briefly, I think there are two separate issues. One is sort of his legal rights as a government employee, and then there's the cancel culture issue, and those are separate. So I mean, in terms of his legal rights, obviously private companies have the right to hire and fire people for saying things as they want. You know, if you have somebody who's saying things that you think hurt your bottom line, you're totally entitled to fire them. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what should be the case, but that is legally speaking the way it is. On the other hand, government employees have somewhat heightened protections because the government has to abide by constitutional strictures. So you have a First Amendment right as a government employee. That doesn't mean you can say anything, though. The government has to show basically that if it's firing you for something you said, the point of view that it conveyed, that it had a really compelling interest in that policy. And I think you could very easily argue that the government has a compelling interest in firing people who say, you know, normalize hate against a certain ethnic group. It would be harder to make the case that the government has a compelling interest, say, in firing someone who thinks Israel shouldn't bomb Gaza, or, you know, various other controversial, or we shouldn't allow immigrants in, or something like that. Although, of course, it depends on the position. So that's sort of the legal landscape. Different question from the cancel culture issue. And we had Salome on because she made a lot of interesting comments. So I'll let you sort of summarize your position, Salome.
Yeah, I think it's complicated because the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, not this shit again. And I think there's a lot of people that are tired of seeing tweets get dug up and have that be used to throw away someone's career entirely, when a lot of the times the people that are doing this themselves have skeletons in their closet, and it just becomes a cudgel that one side weaponizes against the other. Now, at the same time, I do understand the idea of not wanting to be associated with someone that has such a reckless public persona. I think it matters, like, how old are these tweets and this kind of thing. And as we go into the future, this kind of thing, I think, will be less tolerated potentially, because there's enough time now to realize someone's going to dig up your tweets. So if you're the type of person that has grown up in this environment, at a certain point, it starts to become actually a reflection of your competence, just in the same way that any behavior done publicly that could be affecting your employment in the future is a reflection of your competence and your judgment.
Right.
The thing is, like, you see people that want to defend it, right? On the one hand, because it's like, why are we still doing this kind of cancel culture thing where people have their past dug up and use that against them when they haven't actually done anything in the position is related to the job that they're doing
Right.
that reflects like malice or incompetence or something. And in particular, it depends also like, what is the job that's being done, and is this person in a position to like normalize Indian hate? Because then that would be more of a concern, right? If it's someone that's not even related to their job, okay, they're odious potentially. Are they still? I don't know. But it's not likely that they're going to somehow like spread that view or do something to actually enact that view in their position. On the other hand, you have this kind of like, which I see like as a growing problem, is this like rush to lower everybody's standards for everything because, well, those people did it and we don't want to give them anything. And so now we're going to be the worst too because they're the worst. So let's also be the worst. So, you know, I don't know enough. It's not my company. I don't know the person. This is something that like very often what we saw when this happened where the left would try to cancel someone for old tweets, whatever, was that it was an act of like mobocracy where these outsiders wanted to decide what someone should do within their business with someone that they actually have a personal relationship, whereas these people don't know anything about this person. And so I would put it on the plate of the employer to decide. I mean, if the employer decides this is Doge we're talking about, so I don't know if that's the first place that people be like, oh my God, we're so scared of the mob. Perhaps they've made an informed decision about this person potentially being a liability in many other ways because they actually know the person. So in some ways, like, we get sucked into this kind of like, the masses shall pass judgment on a stranger. And it's just like, I don't know, maybe we should all move away from that entirely, because at this point it's just becoming like a tug of war, and I don't know if it actually gets us anywhere.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I don't think it was a personal issue. I think it was a reflexive backlash, them forcing him to resign, right? Because we saw Elon came out. I don't know if you guys saw yesterday, but he did a poll on his Twitter about if should Big Balls be rehired, and you know, the overwhelming, obviously we all know Elon's followers and whatnot.
Right.
The overwhelming response was yes, it should have. I was annoyed. Of course, I don't think that people should be fired for things that say even really, really cows for legal speech that they make in their off time on a private account, especially before they were employed, right? And so I mean, I'm pretty hardcore about that, but the problem for me is that we saw with the right, especially following October 7th, that they had no principles, right? And they threw all of the principles, all of the hard work that they had done, you know, countering cancel culture for years, threw it straight out the window in defense of, you know, this foreign country and censoring any kind of criticism of it. And so they're all just a bunch of hypocrites, right?
Yeah,
because we all know that if he said, normalize hating Jews,
forget it.
that would be done. It would be, you know, it would be over.
I have a slightly different view on it. And I mean, it's something I don't think I've entirely figured out what it is. But I mean, I've sort of been, had people try to fire me from a left-wing perspective when I was a public defender and I was anti-COVID restriction. And then from the right, because of my positions on Israel. And I, you know, obviously I don't want to be fired. I don't think it's fair. I think I should be able to criticize COVID policies and our foreign policy with respect to Israel without getting fired. On the other hand, I fully expect that if I said I hate Black people or I hate Jews, I would get fired. Right. Not that either of those things are true, but I understand there's a line, and I'm not sure exactly what the line is, right? Like, people say that I'm effectively anti-Semitic because of the things I say. I take major issue with that. I'm criticizing Israel policy. I don't have any problem with Jewish people. As I've said many times, like half my friends are Jewish at any given time, usually. You know, I've never said anything about Jews as a whole. I don't think those things. Same with any other group of people. So I think I am comfortable with some line drawing, and
Mhm.
I don't like the idea. I think it is a little bit of a problem to say like a company or even the government can't fire someone when they say things that are, I think pretty hateful.
Yeah, yeah. I think the problem is that it's like, where do we draw the line, right? And we
Yeah.
saw
Right.
the line, especially when the left was doing it, a few years ago. It was so ridiculous. I remember that professor, I think it was at Brown, where they said something about the Halloween costumes, right? And I
Yes.
forget, I can't remember the exact details about that, but it was such just a kind of a nuanced take.
They
Should not have
had
been controversial whatsoever.
Mm.
You
I
do you
think it
remember?
was Yale, yeah. So they had Salome. You were probably like 12, No, I'm kidding. But they had the administrators, high up administrators, had refused to give a list of like what were appropriate Halloween costumes, and it said
Right.
we think that college kids are able to figure this stuff out on
Mm.
their own, whether Cleopatra or whatever
Mhm.
Pocahontas is offensive. That
Right.
we're going to let you guys sort that out. And according to some extremely left wing, politically correct people, that was racist and offensive and unacceptable.
Oh,
The administration was absolutely, obligated to come in and say what was offensive and inappropriate. And they ended up resigning.
yeah, yeah.
The
I mean, it was
administrators who
huge.
were in charge.
I
Yeah.
remember the mob, like the videos of these people just shouting in these professors' faces. I mean, it was so obscene, so
Yeah.
ridiculous. And so I think, you see the pendulum swing, right? When it goes that far one way, you're going to see it come back to where now you've got people, and maybe me, maybe because I don't know, maybe some, kind of second or third hand PTSD. I'm like, no, we have to take it all the way back the other way. You can say whatever you want to say, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sort of comfortable drawing some lines, and like my
Mhm.
employer can fire me. I will say commendably they have not, even though they've gotten many 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 complaints. um, and I'm a free speech lawyer, so I think they're aware that it
Mhm.
wouldn't like it would be a little strange to fire me for my views, especially well for various reasons. But I am I'm okay with some line drawing,
Mhm.
and like it does matter who you work for, right? If I worked for like a Jewish tablet Zionist publication or something, I
Right.
would expect to
Right.
be fired because what I'm
Right.
saying goes completely against their you know, what they think. I mean, and which wouldn't have been beyond the pale because I like wrote for them a lot at some point, obviously no longer. There were points in my career at which like I probably could have become like a Fox News pundit, and I would expect that if I were saying the things on social media now, that they just
I don't
do
know though. I
differently.
disagree. I think we should push back against that. Like I thought when Candace Owens got fired from the Daily Wire for her very reasonable takes as far as I'm concerned. I really thought that was BS. And I thought, okay, obviously they can. It's their right. They have the
Yeah,
right to fire people. But I don't think that you should. I think it's wrong. I think we should discourage it. And I'm actually going to use my money and my influence, my preferences.
sure.
That makes me want to cancel you, essentially,
Sure,
right?
sure. Totally fair. I mean, and I think for them it ends up being a cost benefit analysis, right? If a lot
Yeah.
of the money they
Right.
get is through people who are very pro Israel or, pro whatever the situation is, then they're going to have to make that assessment. And by protesting and making these points, I think we make it harder, right? If we make
Right.
the points like, hey, Americans should be able to criticize our government's foreign policy without getting fired from their jobs. This is ridiculous. This obviously shows like a stranglehold in another country. As
Mhm.
maybe if enough of us say that, it changes that cost benefit analysis. So I think you're absolutely right that there's no harm in. Sorry, it's the crazy Beitar people are calling me.
But I thought that Salome, I thought you did some really great criticism against because I was drawn to it because you were pushing back against these right wing bros essentially, right? Who all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and I don't know if you guys remember, goodness, I ended up like kicking a hornet's nest back in when after the Trump, when Trump got shot, and then that lady at the Home Depot, post. I don't even remember
Yeah,
what she posted, but people were crazy, and I was like,
yeah,
no, like we shouldn't be trying to get her fired. Like,
yeah.
sorry, like yeah, what she said was crazy inappropriate, right? I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong, but what are we doing here? And oh my gosh, you should, I was just like attacked for hours. Like people
Wow.
went on tirades talking about what a stupid bee I was. And I was like, this is why women don't know how to wield power,
Classic.
yada, yada, yada. Women are so
Yeah.
dumb when it comes, and then here we are 6 months later. Now, one of our guys has said something really inappropriate, and everybody's like, oh, so we're back to cancel culture now. It's like, you were the ones that brought it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
This
know?
is the problem. It's like there's such an unprincipled wielding of cancel culture, and it really makes no one want to actually abide by it on principle, because they know that they're going to be the only ones that are abiding by it. So why
Right.
set yourself up for a disadvantaged position when everybody else is going to cancel your people and you're going to be the one that takes the high road? Now, of course, I personally believe in standing for your principles regardless of whether other people are doing it, because that's going to affect your personal life and your integrity, not just whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage to the people that you dislike. I mean, very often, like, the actions that they take will be punished in the end when they finally meet the repercussions of, oh, well, we wielded this power, but now we're no longer in power. Now people are going to wield it against us. So, I mean, the principled position often pays benefits in the end, even if it's not a short-term benefit. But the other thing that I see with a lot of this is just like, it's funny that you bring up this, like, oh, women can't wield power. I am so tired of this bullshit, because it's often coming from the most absolutely irrational, emotional, vindictive, resentful, like, internet warrior men. And I'm like,
stupid, really stupid, very, very stupid.
I'm the emotional one when I'm like, let's think through this.
Yeah.
Let's be strategic.
Yeah.
Let's consider the principles.
Yeah.
No, you're just a crazy woman. You can't wield power. And it's like, you seem pretty emotional right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
Also, I was like, you guys are claiming scalps of cashiers at Home Depot.
Yeah.
They're claiming scalps of the guys running the federal audits.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
They are, no, you need to understand balance of power.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to
Yeah.
understand what it is how much you're
Exactly.
able to wield. If you're going to, cash in all of your chips and trade all your principles, at least make it worth it, man.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Be strategic.
Yeah.
And I know this sounds it could be construed as condescending, but I do think there's a difference between, like, people who are working at Home Depot as a cashier and people who are in positions of some authority, as you just mentioned, just drawing out that. I mean,
Right.
who really cares what the cashier at Home Depot
Exactly.
thinks, unless everybody
Right.
decides to make a big deal about it. Like, there's no way
Right.
that she's going to ring up my goods differently.
Yeah,
Because,
exactly.
like, I don't know, is she going to charge me twice? And I'll just be like, you charged me twice. Because
Yeah.
whatever, if you don't like
Yeah.
my name, you think it's the Arab or something.
Right. Exactly.
But I mean,
Right.
these guys have control over extremely, what they're
Mhm.
privy to, and then they also a lot of sensitive information, and then they have quite a bit of control. So it's a very, very different thing.
Oh, definitely. But at the same time, though, it's like, we were talking about this the other day, that I think with the Doge thing, everybody is really, really high, like very sensitive right now to it. And I think one big reason why is because they have not been very forthcoming about, the metrics that they're using, the formulas that they're using in order to, cut these programs and whatnot. It seems really, I don't want to say shady, perhaps, but I don't think it's necessarily shady. I think it's purposefully shrouded, because it's hard to cut government programs. Obviously, we stage protests, people lose their jobs, all of these things. So I understand it from both perspectives, but I think that some of this would have just been helped if they were a little bit more forthright about, this is exactly what these guys are doing, this is how long it's going to last, and then we're going to, because again, Congress has already appropriated this money, right? So we can put a pause on it, but from what I understand, it actually does have to get spent, right? And so all of this is going to end up going towards Trump's new proposed budget, right? So everything for fiscal year 2025 is already, from what I understand, is already on the books. Like, there's nothing they can do about it. The spigots are going to get turned back on in like 60 days or whatnot. But
So all the money for Israel is though.
So
no more
yeah.
government.
So we saw that yesterday. So Biden got the ball rolling on this $8 billion in weapons, and then Trump is now continuing it. Of course, and I think it's so interesting. And we said this is what was going to happen. Of course, Trump is getting all the blame for this, even though it did in fact, if we're being fair, start under Biden. But again, it's like, well, you're pausing on the funding on everything else. All of this other stuff got stopped under Biden. So certainly, kind of spare me this excuse. You have the power to stop it. You've already you're showing us right now that you do. So
yeah, I would rather pay for transgender opera development in Honduras than bombs for Israel. But
yeah, that's more harmless.
Ideally, neither.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you guys see the UN came out and said that, or the New York Post had a piece. The UN came out and said that 6.5 million people are going to die if Trump's budgets of AIDS in Africa, if Trump's budget cuts go through, which again, I think it was Katie Herzog. She posted about that. She said all of the comments and replies to this are just so dark and everything, and there's no empathy. And I understand that to a certain extent, but at the same time, I'm flashback to COVID, and I remember the way that, these numbers were used against us. Exactly. They were manipulated. All these people are going to die if we don't do this thing. And so I do think, I'm definitely one of these people that I'm really hardened on that. I'm like, what do you mean they're going to die? Like,
yeah, explain.
Yeah, explain. This because you know what? If the bombs get dropped, those people are going to die. Like, we know that, right?
Yeah.
But you saying that, if we don't fund, I don't know, this stage 3 trial on something that tens of thousands of people, that's ridiculous. That's speculative at best.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I know we have a little bit of it, we don't entirely see eye to eye on this one, but I am a little uncomfortable with the speed with which this is happening, and the fact, I mean, maybe it's ageist, but it makes me uncomfortable that it's like a bunch of kids basically with very little life experience. I mean, there's something to be said for life experience and like being able to think through. I mean, these guys, I don't think have very much experience with at all with like what these, programs might do. Or I wish it didn't have to move so fast. I mean, at the same time, there's like ridiculous amounts of government waste. I don't think our government should be doing a lot of the things it's doing. I would like to see major cuts and more money in my paycheck. but like, I don't love how it's happening. I think it has to, because Doge can only exist for 60 days without congressional authorization. So I think that's the reason, but it makes me a little uncomfortable, but I'll just hope for the best.
Right. I think I like the youth doesn't bother me because these guys are so smart, like all of them. Like I was reading the resumes on them. Like, I mean, they're all little super geniuses, right? And I think that they're going about it in like a very methodical, like a numbers way. It's just like straight about the numbers, and they're not really worried about it. But again, all of this is just going to be a proposal, right? These are this is what we think needs to be cut, and this is why. And I'm sure that they have a formula. And like I said, I think it would be better if they just shared that with the people, so that we could understand. But what do you think, Salome?
The interesting thing, and I wonder what you guys think, because I have the feeling that in some ways we've never seen this much transparency to a certain extent. So in my lifetime, there's never been a kind of like public process of here's what we're going through, here's what we're auditing, here's what we're finding, here's what our goals are, in this way that you see Doge and Elon Musk doing. Like, it's a kind of almost a live streaming type approach to going through these audits and letting people know, here's what we're finding, here's what's going on. And now you have all these people like on their own going through the US aid payments and taking their time on this. And so in some ways, like, if I think back to all the previous administrations, I don't remember there ever being this kind of like in real time looking through of government programs that's happening on this public level. I do agree with you that I think part of the reason that it feels opaque is because of the increased transparency around what Doge is doing and kind of showing people, we are actually going to start looking through all this. Here's what we're finding. But then, of course, that leads people to say, well, how are you doing this? How are these decisions getting made? Whereas in previous administrations, I think this all happened mostly behind closed doors, or like in the really dry, boring, like C-SPAN type environment that never got enough public attention for people to start being like, oh, look what they found.
Yeah.
It's intentionally put into that way so that you don't try to look into these things and figure it out, which is why there's so much crazy waste.
Right. Well, see, so all of this has always been like open source, right? Anybody could go look through it. And I know because I've dug through all of the FEC records, and I've dug through grants and stuff. I think the thing that's made it so accessible is there is this account. It's like the Data Republican account. They did actually make a really helpful, very easy to navigate system, which actually kind of bypassed the US Gov or the US grants.gov system. Much easier to search. Although, unfortunately, what you're also seeing is that a lot of people don't understand the things that they're pulling up.
Yeah.
They're accusing people who are not receiving government funds of receiving government funds. It's connecting to people's 99s or 990s. They don't understand what they're looking at. And so sometimes, obviously, I think more information is good. Sometimes, though, you have to slow your roll. You have to make sure you're approaching it without your agenda. You need to check your agenda at the door when you're coming to look at this open source intel, because you'll just get lost, or you'll end up looking stupid, which a lot of people have ended up looking really dumb, right? Posting things that they don't clearly either don't know how to read these documents, or they don't want to, or in fact, maybe they just know they're lying and they think their audience is stupid enough that, they don't care. But so I think it's made it much more accessible, which is good in the end. But people need to chill on some of the stuff. They need to, stop trying to accuse everyone. I saw somebody accusing Tracy Beans, who I really like and who has printed me. She's one of the ones. She runs DC Undercover or Uncover DC, and she has shared all of my articles, all of my threads. Even though I think we probably do disagree on Israel and Gaza, she's never once given me crap about that. Like, not one time. And somebody was accusing her of being a Mossad agent yesterday.
Really?
I assure you, if Tracy Beans was a Mossad agent, I'm fairly certain she would in fact not ask me if she could print my threads, and she would in fact not share my posts. You know what I mean? What the hell?
Yeah. I have a question about this is a real question. Why, okay, so they have 60 days. Couldn't they just come up with a proposal instead of actually trying to effectuate the plan immediately? Because part of the problem I have is that this just is happening so fast. I think also, in fairness to people who are employed, at USAID, it's kind of, shitty to be told you're unemployed starting tomorrow instead of maybe in 2 months. So why couldn't they have taken the 60 days to come up with a proposal instead of actually trying to implement it immediately?
So I don't actually understand exactly what's been done, and I'm always curious. So I know some of them, they've announced they're going to cancel the contract, but like I said, if it's already been appropriated, I don't actually think that they can until they pass the new budget, which would be not budget, but omnibus in sometime in October is when the fiscal year starts. But obviously, if their government employees are not fired, right, they have to actually agree to something. And if they're contracted, I don't know, they probably actually do just have. And I live around a military base, and those kind of things actually do kind of happen pretty often. People who are government contractors are paid a lot more even than government workers, but they know that at any minute, literally at any minute, it could be canceled. So I don't know.
Got it.
I think that I'm trying not to buy into the left being super hysterical about it. And I'm also trying not to buy into the right being oh yeah, we're cutting everything because I'm a realist. No, you're not. Okay. Yeah. You're just not.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but, no. So we had another, I wanted to bring up a question, and I'm going to pose this to you all and see what you guys think. This is from Samir, and he commented on our last video. talking about Marco Rubio. I don't know if you guys saw Marco Rubio was a commentary. So, did you guys read the letter from Saudi Arabia, the kingdom put out a letter to directly addressing? I don't know if people didn't see. Benjamin Netanyahu 2 days ago came out and said, well, the Saudis should just give the Palestinians some of their land. They should make a Palestine in their country, right? Which was really kind of, I mean, it's one thing if, like Ben Gvir or Smoldrick says something like that, but it's quite different when it's the prime minister of Israel saying that. Right. And to me, when I read that immediately, I was like, uh-oh, things are not going well behind the scenes here, right? And it sounds like there's a roadblock. And then so last night, or maybe sometime early this morning, the official Saudi Arabian press conference or press secretary put out this really firm statement on let me see, and I can send it. I'm gonna try to send it to my thing and I can share it with you all. And what it says basically is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia appreciates the condemnation, disapproval, and total rejection announced by the brotherly countries towards Benjamin Netanyahu. So he's using his full name, stated regarding the displacement of the Palestinian people from their land. And the kingdom values the positions that emphasize the centrality of the Palestinian issue to the Arab and Muslim countries. In this context, the kingdom stresses its categorical rejection to such statements that aim to divert attention from the continuous crimes committed by the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian brothers in Gaza, including the ethnic cleansing they are subjected to. And it goes on, and it's really long, and he calls the proposal, which he never named, they don't name Trump in, but they name Netanyahu a couple times, I think 3 times in here, extremist. And so I think that that's definitely signaling some real tension behind the scenes, right? Because this is just not going to go over well with the people of these countries if their governments sit by and don't do anything as this extreme wrong is committed against the Palestinians. And so Marco Rubio the other day, he came out and he kind of like hinted at what I thought was almost like a right of return. He's like, no, we're going to clear them out, and then we're gonna clean it all up, and then people are gonna have something nice to come home to. And I thought it was so generous of Trump to say these things. And Samir said, Marco dodged the question about right of return at the presser in the Dominican Republic today, so I don't trust any guarantees he may have given yesterday. But let's go with the story for a second. It then raises the question: so is the U.S. going to rebuild Gaza and allow all Gazans back in for what? And out of the goodness of our hearts. So he says, why is the U.S. suddenly interested in cleaning up Gaza after supplying the weapons that demolished it? It doesn't hold up, which is right? Yeah. Obviously, he is 100% right that the math doesn't math there. So what do you think? What do you think is motivating Trump on all of this?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. I truly don't know. I mean, we had that chaotic moment of Trump stating that we're going to go into Gaza, we're going to rebuild it, and this conference with Netanyahu there like smiling in this way, and I was just like, I think I'm hallucinating. This is the weirdest shit I've ever seen. This is not even what we would hear when it came to previous failed wars in the Middle East, where you did hear this kind of like, we're gonna set up a democracy there, we're gonna help them rebuild, whatever. But this is such a different case, because why wouldn't Israel just do it? Why would we come in and do this in this way? Like, there is another country there that is responsible for this destruction. What does it imply that the US is going to come in and now rebuild? Like, what
and
kind
assume that responsibility?
It's so odd. It doesn't seem to connect to any kind of strategy that would make sense to me. So I really don't know. And I kind of have the sense that it's Trump doing Trump, which is often like talking shit and seeing maybe what sticks, what doesn't stick, in a very like his characteristic businessman approach, which is just like talk a big game, see what sticks, follow through on what does. And that, of course, does not work the same in American politics or pretty much any politics, where diplomacy is like the most precise game where every word matters because you can imply vastly different strategies by just shifting a few words. And so I'm hoping, we saw this kind of like walked back in the next few days afterwards. It was like, well, we didn't really mean it like that exactly. And Rubio seems to be in some ways like working on that walk back. And so I really, I think I've never seen a proposal be so universally unpopular with the American public. Like, this united the right, the left, the middle. The only people who liked this were neocons and Zionists, who are often the same group. So that was it. So I really would be shocked if this moved forward.
Maybe he was trying to unite the American people, and he did so successfully.
Oh, he did it. I have never seen so many people be like, you know what, actually, this is kind of sus. Maybe these crazy people I thought were anti-Semites, they might be onto something. It's like, we're trying to tell you something weird going on here. And this was really that. So I truly don't have theory of mind for what Trump is doing beyond that.
Yeah, I struggled with it. I thought about it for, I was furious. We talked about it extensively the other day. He's definitely walked it. He's walked it back, but he hasn't walked it back the way I wanted him to, right? So he walked back the troops. He walked back the payment, right? But the core issue that he has not walked back is that these people got to go, right? And that's a problem. That's a big problem. And because what it shows me is that somebody has convinced him, right? Normally he'll walk it all back, right? And I was genuinely expecting him to say something to the effect of, no, we will give them a chance to come back, right? And he, for whatever reason, it's like he doesn't want to say that, which is weird because usually he'll just say whatever he has to say to smooth the situation over. He has no qualms about that, right? And so that's been concerning to me personally, because it tells me that there's something else going on there. There's somebody with some serious sway over him whispering in his ear. As I tweeted out earlier that we need a restraining order against Jared Kushner. He should not be allowed near the POTUS 500 yards.
That's so true.
For the good of our country, because of course that's the person that I think it is that's whispering in his ear.
Or Ivanka.
Right.
Yeah. That's a really direct line. And I wonder, I mean, I'll pose this to you. Considering that letter you cited, this kind of push on the surrounding countries to clean up Israel's mess really seems to me like something that other countries would find deeply offensive. And, we're talking about countries like Saudi Arabia and that really are key partners in some respect to the US. Don't we get a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia? Don't we have a lot of business in this regard? I mean, this is like kind of one of those strategic countries for the US in the Middle East, not just Israel, as everyone likes to claim that this is our only strategic ally in the Middle East. And so it seems to be like, and this has been the case now for a while, but like Israel is running rampant in this region and causing more and more stress on the ties to the United States from other surrounding countries. And like a policy like this seems like, hey, come clean up their mess, which is just like any self-respecting leader is like, you got me messed up if you think that's what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's very hard to make the argument that our relationship with Israel is beneficial at this point. I mean, the way we've elevated it to like this special, I don't buy it. Maybe at some point, but certainly not anymore.
Right, not now. Yeah, it seemed more like a liability at this point.
I know. Yeah. I came across a really great thread and analysis the other day. I'll have to share it with you guys and see what y'all think. Again, I am definitely not in the camp of the U.S. controls Israel. I don't buy that. I fully 100% reject that. It's just because, again, everybody who says that, nobody ever points me. I'm like, our largest military base is in Qatar. In the Middle East is in Qatar. We have something like 13 military bases in Saudi Arabia. We do not need this country that is on the very, very edge of the region to begin with,
Yeah.
We don't need them in any way, shape, or form. We just don't. All right. Everybody knows that their intelligence is crap. We don't get any natural resources from them. Yes, I know that there are gas fields, off the coast. That's undeveloped. All right. It just is. And again, we could just take it if we wanted to. So obviously there's this very, very deep, I want to say it is deep. It's this emotional attachment that especially neocons, but a lot of older Americans have towards Israel, and it stems from the World War II, fallout of the Holocaust, persecution of the Jews, all of that. There's reasons for it. Whether they're good or bad is obviously up for debate, but that's what drives all of it, right? And as those people die out, I think you're going to see a stronger grasp for power. How can we maintain this control over the U.S. because we don't have that kind of emotional control over the populace anymore. So now, and this is stemming into, we wanted to talk about this new policy that Israel has. And did you want to pull it up, Jenin?
Yeah. I'm not going to show the whole thread because it's a lot, but so in light of the fact that Israel is losing popularity in the United States, especially among the under 50 crowd, they are upping their propaganda game. So for people who don't know, Hasbara is sort of the Hebrew term for propaganda. It technically means explaining, but it's widely understood to mean how you keep public sympathy on your side. So they are going to devote an extra $150 million a year, I think, towards their propaganda efforts, 20 times what they were before. And among other things, I think these are some of the most interesting. Hide the money. Israel will now fund pro-Israel PR groups in the US and Europe through the use of public benefit corporations. So you see a bank transfer from a PBC and not a bank transfer from the Israeli government. Another one is highlight the Jewish religion. Israel plans to double down on bringing religion into its propaganda playbook by tying Judaism more directly to Zionism and its global messaging. And then, that was, I have this weird thing where it shows a different, this is why I have trouble with it. I saw something different than you guys did. So the first pillar of the new strategy, decentralization, instead of Israeli officials delivering the talking points, the government will funnel the money to independent organizations, influencers, and activists to spread the message. Second pillar, aggression, not persuasion. No more trying to win hearts and minds with apologetics. The new approach, just hammering home pro-Israel messaging with conviction. Think less Israel regrets civilian casualties and more that's war, deal with it.
Yeah, if you're spending time on X, you know that you have seen this. You have absolutely, there's without a doubt, you have encountered, you have directly encountered this kind of messaging shift, right? It's get over it. This is what war is. I know that
I'll share the second one too, just that I read.
Oh, yeah.
I'll read it again, but so everybody can see it. So that's
I know a lot of people I read this and I knew about the budget increase because that got announced in December, but I read this and I was kind of like, wow, this kind of reeks of desperation to me, right? Because if you get more bees with honey, and clearly they have just given up on the honey.
They're out of honey.
And they're switching over to, apparently they're just going to use fire hoses full of vinegar on everybody. I don't see this working.
No.
And what's interesting to me is that a lot of these strategies seem to be solutions or responses to what we've seen coming out. So hiding the money, that is one of the common things that I see in response to any Zionist propaganda. It's oh, you're funded. You just look it up and you find that the person has been funded. That's one of the common ways that people counter this narrative, is when they find out you seem to be deeply, literally invested in this narrative succeeding. And then the thing with the influencers, right? We've seen that's just a common strategy at this point. I mean, businesses use it, nonprofits use it, government uses it, everybody uses it because they know that legacy media is failing and officials associated with the government seem suspicious to people now. And so let's have it be your local influencer, which of course we've seen exactly that. So a lot of these strategies seem to be responses to the failures of previous strategies.
And not just So
No,
real
go
quick,
ahead.
they're not,
Yeah, yeah.
to me, they're super reflexive, right? They are
Mm,
not, they don't really seem to be well thought out plan. That's not a plan. Just kind of
yeah.
switching
Right.
and again, dealing, oh, well, you don't like the debts, that's war, get over it. That is so, and I know, you might think, well, that's not exactly what they're going to do. But the thing is if you spend enough time, you actually
You
realize
already
that
see it.
that is literally exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and,
Yeah.
and
War is
Yeah.
hell.
Right. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, that kind of shows that you don't have a plan. And, we see this, and it seems to be almost a cultural thing with Israelis, especially, is they just simply don't want to acknowledge any weakness. I think they see any sort yeah, maybe I did this wrong or I did this wrong. They see that as a sign of weakness and self
Mm,
reflection, and if you're not even willing to concede any ground whatsoever, you're just going to lose. And not
Right.
only that, you're going to lose and you're going to turn people off forever. So I don't know. I personally see this as a bad, it might work in the very, very short term, a year, maybe. I don't see this working well at all. Um, you know,
Yeah, and to this, I mean, I'm a very sort of naturally pessimistic person. So my first reaction was like, oh my God, they're going to up the budget by 20 times. We're done. We're toast. We can't possibly, we might have the truth on our side, but if you have, like so much more resources than we have to
A lot of people don't
devote to
want the
this
truth.
effort. Yeah.
mhm.
That I felt a little hopeless, but I actually think Melissa makes a really good point. And they've been trying to do this and it hasn't worked because in the
Right.
end, people don't want to see 20,000 or 50,000 or possibly 100,000 dead kids. And
Yeah.
there's nothing that that anybody
Yeah.
can say that's going to make them be okay with that. Or the largest population of child amputees that we've ever had in modern times, which is what Gaza is now. So I hope that you're right. One clever tactic I think I've seen that I assume that they're saying they're basically going to increase these efforts is there are influencers who are not Jewish, which I'm not like judging people by that, but you would not necessarily think that they are being funded by Israeli efforts. But I think it's clear they are, like people at the Manhattan Institute. I'm not going to name names right now. But so it doesn't occur to most people like, oh, that they're being paid to say this. But I think what does stand out is you're like, these arguments don't make sense. Like you're doubling down on completely nonsensical arguments. And
You're
I
not
think you
just
guys know who
doubling
I'm talking
down.
about.
You're not just doubling down, but you're upping your budget 20-fold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, that tells you right there. This is a country that is broke, is their economy is hurting, and I don't know. To me, when you've got you're already your Hespera is not working, I would personally just probably withdraw completely, right? Like we need to
Yeah.
pull back. We need to maybe reassess. Are we being too abrasive? How are we coming off?
Yeah.
Instead of tripling, I don't know, 20 times more of the same crap, except
Yeah.
let's just up it the asshole bit just a little bit more,
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
just terrible planning.
The government that's installed now is an extremist Zionist government. It is really rather one of the more extreme sects of Zionism. I believe Netanyahu is pretty well documented as being a revisionist Zionist, which is specifically a Zionist who wants to maximize territory. And so even within the group of people who consider themselves Zionists, there is dislike for this strategy. And so this kind of like doubling down on what has already been unpopular within the people that believe of this ideology just seems to me like one of those like last ditch efforts. And we were talking earlier and I was like, we're cooked. Like I am a doomer on this because really we're kind of early is what it is. Like we have been early to realizing what's going on here. I mean, my story, like we came into contact in part, me and Jenin, because of an essay I wrote, and that was like, and Jake's work previously, which was about my realization that like, oh wait, I did not understand what this ideology entailed. This is not the same as just like, oh, protect your country, protect your people. This is the opposite. This is put your people at risk for the sake of nation building. And that is just, to me, antithetical to what it is to pursue a classical liberal society and individual rights and all of these things that I have advocated for years, in opposition to the left. And so you see this kind of like immediate aftermath of October 7th, where people who were in this position of like advocating for classical liberalism or individual rights and things like this suddenly turn tail and say, but not if it's Israel. And not if the people we're going against are Muslim. In that case, right, everything's on the table then. And so,
and it's collective guilt is like the major philosophy,
which we heard all the same people lecture us about how terrible this is, white privilege, white guilt, whatever. Oh, we don't need this in a society. It's bad. It's corrosive. It causes conflict. Except when it's convenient for me to weaponize it against my enemies that I perceive as being such. And so my thing is like, I think that we're just kind of early to this, and it's painful. It's very often painful to be early to things, which is like one of the whole reasons I started my publication, The Black Sheep, because I realized this pattern recurs throughout history, where you have people that have less allegiance to like a tribe or group acceptance. So they're the first ones to be like, oh, nope, the group's wrong. So you guys are going in the wrong direction. I'm going to tell you right now. And then the group's like, oh no, we don't want to hear any of it. We don't want to hear any of it. We're still enjoying our delusion, or we're in some collective hysteria. We're literally irrational and cannot grapple with the idea of dissent from our own, even from our own. And you see this turn into, you're not our own, actually. You're one of them. The amount of people I have had call me a leftist now, like a oh, you're just like a pro-Hamas leftist. I'm like, what? Would you like to check my career? Like, could you just do like a 5-second check on who you're talking to? And so I think in some ways we're just early to recognizing what's going on. And you're correct, Mel, in your assessment.
It's so weird for me to think that, because as you guys know, like I grew up with this, I'm 41 now. Like I've heard about this issue since as long as I can remember, since my dad's Palestinian. So I grew up very much with the other perspective, to the extent where I have to like check myself to make sure I'm not just being biased, towards Palestinians. And I think I do a decent job. I mean, I always try to put myself in the other shoes, think about the other arguments. That's, you can't be a good lawyer if you're not able to do that. But since like, to me, this has been going on my entire life. I'm like, when October 7th happened, I actually completely overestimated how much Americans knew. And like the people around me, I was friends with a lot of the COVID dissident crowd. We had all become very close over opposing restrictions. And I thought like, these are people who question propaganda, they question the prevailing narrative, they must like look at things carefully, and oh my god, I was in for a nasty surprise when they were all like, just raise them all, they're all guilty, they're all monsters.
It was a 9/11 response. Like it very much, to me, as I look back, like we haven't even come to that time in our culture, just like it took for 9/11, where it took like a decade before people could say, you know what, I think there was something going on there that was a little more emotion driven and wasn't quite actually as
why
nuanced.
Didn't people, sorry, I didn't, but why didn't people apply that here though? Because it's so similar. That
it's too soon. I think it's too soon.
It's not just that. There was a concerted we saw it was the atrocity propaganda that got pushed on us. I'm telling you. I think that I think that in years to come, that will be studied, how unbelievably effective it was to tell people that 40 babies had been beheaded, to tell people that babies had been put into an oven, to say that women had been raped until their pelvises broke. All of these things, these absolute lies, to say that, I don't know. Did you guys see where Yoav Gallant came out and confirmed Hannibal? And so when you say, oh, they attacked a music festival and they just lit kids on fire, and then they show all of the pictures of the cars being lit on fire. And then, of course, some of us were immediately saying, you mean they just got in the cars and lit themselves on fire along with the kids? That doesn't make any sense, right? Even though we know that, initially the numbers were 1,400, and then they had to come out and revise it down to 1,200. And actually, it's even a little less than that. Why? Because they had all of these Hamas fighters that had been burnt beyond recognition. So they had just counted their bodies. And it's like, well, how did those people get burnt so bad? How were those people in those cars that we see the pictures, like the highway going back into Gaza? How did those cars get burned so badly? And who else was in the cars with them? Right? Because if you've got 200 people that's what happened to them, well, presumably they've got at least one hostage with them in these cars. I think there was something like 189 cars that got burnt up. What the hell? Like, can we talk about that? And so, but again, no, none of that. It was just this atrocity propaganda that got pushed on us so intensely that, and it did what it was supposed to do, right? Exactly what it was intended to do. It worked.
Yeah. And it's traumatizing for people. You know, this is the thing that I would appreciate if people just took a moment to be honest about the fact that they found it really traumatizing. And it's like, okay, yeah, you can have your spin, but have you even admitted to the fact that you were deeply emotionally impacted by the footage you saw, and that perhaps it's very likely that that impacted the judgments you made and the position you took afterwards? Because I mean, that's just how humans work. That's what happened to me. I had no conception of what was going on between Israel and Palestinians. None of that. I didn't even really know the word Zionism. To me, I was just like, is that what they call Israel? Like, is that just their being Israeli is Zionism? Like, I had no idea. And so, of course, to me, my first real interaction with this issue was seeing October 7th. And of course, as any normal person that doesn't have anything previous to that would react, is just like, this is terrible. The people that did this are beyond salvaging. Israel has every right to protect itself and do what it needs to do. That is exactly the kind of response Israel's government would want, because it gives you carte blanche.
Right. Yeah. You know, I've known about this for years. I've spoken out against it for years. And even on the day, I was like, I was like, I mean, this is intense. Like, wow. I had to check myself. Like, this is because there were, this was like, pre all the atrocity propaganda. This was simply just looking at the pictures of, I specifically remember there were some old people that got murdered at a bus stop. Right. And it was really sad. Like, I was just like, oh, they're just old. Like, they're just like old people. Like they were kind of, they were a little bit overweight even. So I was like, they're just kind of like, overweight old
helpless,
people. Like, what, who does that? Like, like this is really, really wrong. And the one thing I tweeted on that day was, killing old people at a bus stop isn't going to change anything that happened in the past, right? And of course, actually, I don't even think anybody even commented or whatnot. A couple people said, "Yeah, you're right," yada yada yada. Because I remember distinctly that the New Hampshire Libertarian account, if you got that account, is just
that
so
Jeremy Coffin,
it's the other guy. I don't
guy.
even know. Yeah, and they tweeted out the picture of the Palestine, like the diminishing land over the years. You know, it's like a picture like 3 and whatnot. And so that was my response to that and whatnot. But then of course I gave it a couple hours, and then I was like, I'm just not going to say anything, because I'm not going to sit here and try to justify this, especially like on the day, obviously. But within 48 hours, I felt like they had already gone so overboard in the other direction that I was like, what the hell? Like, can we not just
breathe?
everybody just talk for a minute? Like, everything just stop. And then of course I've been, balls to the wall ever since.
I mean, that is like, if you look at the pattern of 9/11, it really offers a lot of parallels. Because I mean, in that aftermath, eventually we got the Patriot Act. And so in this aftermath, we have now, what is the like thing that Pam Bondi is doing? It's like a committee to look into another country's
and investigate and prosecute. They're planning to extradite Hamas people, so Israel can't do that on its own. And then also, like, it's a multifaceted effort that also involves like fighting anti-Semitism, and there are like also multiple separate executive orders about fighting anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
We need to actually do an episode about that. I've been sort of reading them carefully and formulating.
Because I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I can't do that in a couple minutes, but I mean, very briefly, it's extremely problematic. It's clearly, and at the same time, Congress is trying to revive that Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which includes the definition of anti-Semitism holding Israel to double standards, which is a very nebulous phrase that, like, what does that even mean? Um, Comparing Israel's actions to that of Nazi Germany. Again, what does that mean? Like, what if you say this is a similar thing to not this component of what Israel, and, trying to implement that. So it's clearly a very multi-pronged effort to stifle criticism of Israel. That's how to summarize it. I would say that's what it is, but we should definitely do more like detailed discussion.
Oh yeah.
I would say it's an unprecedented attack on free speech. I don't think we've had a lot of bad laws passed when there's fear of foreign influence. Like there was the Alien Sedition Act in the 1700s, and we had various laws trying to silence communist propaganda during the 50s and 60s. But we've never had laws that were basically on behalf of a foreign country.
Right.
At least those laws were seen as benefiting America. So this is a very different thing, and I think extremely threatening and worthy of talking about.
Yes, definitely. But we have to go because we are at our hour mark, and we're trying
Salome, tell people where they can find you, though.
Yes.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Substack at Salome Sibonex. And I am also co-founder of the publication on Substack, The Black Sheep, which is at wetheblacksheep.com. You find a lot of individualist philosophy and contrarian takes, because that is what we need, is to listen to the people that are in the minority that disagree and have something good to say, which is often what we are less and less able to do in our culture.
Yes, I agree.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much. And
bye, guys.
We'll be back.
Thank you.